So vastness, entering into vastness. Seems appropriate to talk about space for a moment. So start with an event in 1968 when the Apollo 8 spacecraft was the first mission to take humans to the moon, not to land there, but to take them to the moon and back to Earth. And you may remember if you're of a certain age, or maybe you've seen that image, that remarkable image of the Earth that was sent by the crew from the Apollo 8 back to Earth as they neared the moon's surface. And in those moments, the NASA officials here on Earth asked the crew what were their impressions. And astronaut Jim Lovell said, "The vast loneliness up here of the moon is awe-inspiring. It makes you realize just what you have back on Earth. The Earth from here is a grand oasis in the big vastness of space." So now we have the Hubble and the Webb telescopes, which are vastly increasing our knowledge, our understanding of space, of the universe and beyond. I think the other thing that comes with that vastness, particularly those of us who don't have degrees in physics, is the utter astonishment of what we are seeing, of what's available now, and the mystery of it all. So the question in conjunction with tonight's talk is, how do we bring a perception of vastness to our own living? This perception of expansion, to see that this self, these human organisms, are not permanent, isolated entities, but that each of us is actually an astonishing, mysterious constellation of causes and conditions that come together in any particular moment of time. One writer says that your living is determined not so much by what life brings to you as by the attitude you bring to life. Not so much by what happens to you as by the way your mind looks at what happens. So how does our mind see what happens? One poet decided to frame it as questions, and she calls this poem "Questions Before Dark." Day ends, and before sleep, when the sky dies down, consider your altered state. Has this day changed you? Are the corners sharper or rounded off? Did you live with death? Make decisions that quieted? Find one clear word that fit? At the sun's midpoint, did you notice a patch of absence? Bewilderment that invites the possible? What did you learn from things you dropped and picked up and dropped again? Did you set a straw parallel to the river? Let the flow carry you downstream. Did you set a straw parallel to the river and let the flow carry you downstream? Sometimes that straw of intention, perhaps set parallel to the river, gets caught by torrents of flood water, or in a summer drought, when the water stops, the straw maybe gets caught in a muddy puddle. In another metaphor of water and life, this being alive has been compared to standing at a waterfall, whether it's an enormous one like Niagara Falls or a stream in the Blue Ridge Mountains. But that constant crashing, thundering, nonstop onslaught of sensations, of feelings, of thoughts. We're all familiar with that, getting caught in that flood. The question might be, can we notice where we're standing in relationship to that? Is it right beneath the hammering, the full hammering of the water? Is it out toward the edge, just getting drenched by the spray? Or are we behind the waterfall in a relative space of calm, just hearing the sounds of the water? Can we be simultaneously in the waterfall and like a river rock brought to smoothness and beauty by churning turbulence? So how do we bring a perception of expansiveness to this being? One thing we know is that if the mind is absorbed by a story or busily chattering, that we can believe that there are a committee of voices in this head of ours with an internal dialogue of feelings and thoughts and perceptions. And then there's the external dialogue of voices from the outside, perhaps. And we have to, or we feel compelled to attend to all of them. As soon as we look at our life in terms of preferences, what we like, what we want, what we don't want, what we wish were different, what we are, what we could be, what we should be, what we might have been, what we might still be, we notice contraction around this story, around this, inside this body and around this mind that is trying to perhaps construct a sense of self. And often there's not only a constriction, but there's a sense of stickiness with it, trying to define me, this me-ness, define ourselves. Rick Hansen tells a story of a test that he devised for deciding if a particular identity was worth defining himself by. So he'd ask himself this question: does the identity pass my hound dog test? He spent a lot of time with his hound dog, Rusty. And so he figured that the dog knew him pretty well and knew the real person. So he would ask himself, does my dog think of me as a psychologist? Not so much. Does my dog think of me as an American, as a rock climber, as a published author? And of course, the answer is no. The dog has no such conception. So you might consider your own pet, if you have one, your cat, your dog, your goldfish, whatever's living in your home. How would they respond to those questions of identity? Rick's hound dog, your pet, all know, I am. So this practice is really training the mind to rest in a kind of a quality of wisdom so that you can listen to all those voices, internal, external, and see them arise, this one, that one. They speak, they say something, and then they subside, as long as we're not there to encourage them, feed them. So if we can shift the frame of reference from the self to nature as a whole, we find that nature, and maybe you experienced this if you went outside tonight, has a quality of spaciousness, of calm, that helps us to sense the vastness, sense the expansiveness. And we see more clearly the way things really are, what we truly are, how we exist and how we fit in this universe. So rather than asking the question, who am I? We might just say, I am. Just this: wisdom, loving kindness. In this practice, whenever we pause and become still, perhaps as you did outside with the four elements, we're aware both of movement and stillness. And the analogy to, again, something in nature, a plant, a tree, where there is a degree of stillness, the tree or plant is stationary. Unless there's wind, and then there's movement. And the same is true for us, that there's an awareness of both movement and stillness simultaneously. So the movement of the breath, for example, entering and leaving the body, movement of the rib cage, the nostrils, and the changing perceptions that are ongoing when we're awake, there's often a sense of stillness in and around those perceptions, if we can just be aware of those. It's been said that this foundation of calmness and focus, mindfulness, if you will, and the development of wisdom are part of a natural continuum. Maybe not unlike the blossoming of the blossom on an apple tree and then the bite of the fully ripe apple. So they appear very different from one another. Blossom here in the spring, the apple there in the fall, but in a way, they are elements of the same process. What they speak to is a continuum, a process, and a reality of impermanence, constantly changing from that blossom seen in the spring to the fruit in the fall. And this reality of impermanence is, we know this intellectually, sometimes it creates a degree of insecurity for us because we like some things relatively fixed. If we can think of ourselves as sort of an ever-changing process on that continuum of life, rather than as a fixed identity, then our lives have this way, this opportunity to become a lot more fluid, a lot more creative, open to possibilities that we may not have even yet imagined. We're like a flow through of matter, energy, and information, a constellation of causes and conditions that have come together in this particular moment, right now at 7:56. Not the same as it was at 7 o'clock tonight. And what we know about impermanence is that whatever appears in time appears and then vanishes at once. As soon as you're here, you're gone. Because the you of that moment gives way to the you of this moment. I was reflecting on that the other day when I pulled open a drawer and saw a photograph, which I keep in my study. It's a photograph of me as a second grader, a 7-year-old. And I like to remind myself that that's me too, that obviously was many, many years ago, but that that child, that person who was not yet maybe obscured, had all sorts of beliefs and conditioning, was there. That's part of that continuum. The bloom on the apple tree to the bite of the fully ripe apple. So as soon as we're here, we're gone. The you of that moment gives way to the you of this moment. So the self is not, as we might wish sometimes, a kind of permanent identity. But the good news is that that means it's not isolated, it's ongoing, it's connected, it's merging, it's not isolated, it's constantly flowing, and it's immense. It's awareness itself, love, if you will. This uttering of I am invites or allows our intuitive wisdom to rise. And this means really that we're connecting to the basic ground of our experience. We're not losing ourselves in any experience, but neither are we turning away from any experience. One writer says it like this: be free from all experience, but completely open to all experience, and your innate happiness will shine forth. So I'd like for us to share thoughts on things you've heard tonight, what you've experienced with your practice, meditating, time outdoors perhaps. So what I want to do is have those of you here at UU gather in just small groups, 3 or 4 people. Maybe, yeah, you can make that work, and move over to this side if you need a little space, those of you who are up here. And if you're on Zoom, I think Rachel's going to create some breakout groups with maybe, I don't know, 4 people, Rachel, if that works. Thank you. And let's take about 10 minutes to gather in a small group, 3 or 4 people, and just share. And here's your question. What insights arose for you, either with the 4 elements meditation, with being outside, or with your consideration of impermanence or entering into vastness? So any of those that occurred to you that you have some thoughts about, if you would share those with your Sangha of 3 or 4. And we'll come back here at 8:10. So in your reflections on vastness, on impermanence, on the 4 elements, what arose for you? What observations might you share? A hot mic here, and of course, those of you online, please feel free to speak up, speak out. Yeah.
So I was just thinking about the lack of permanence, and how who you are in 1 minute isn't who you were in the next minute, and transitions, that kind of thing. And it's like the people and the experiences that you meet and you have over time kind of leave you with little extra grains of sand, and you leave some of your grains of sand behind as well, and it all kind of gets mixed together. So when you're leaving a time or leaving an experience, you're taking that with you, and that's why you're not the same, but you've also changed everybody else in that experience as well. And sometimes those grains of sand are more important and are closer to your heart. And sometimes they're ones that you wish you didn't have to carry with you, but just kind of how we move forward in life and how we change.
Thank you, Mara. Yeah. We're in this together. Yeah. What else came up for you? Yes, Dave.
So our little group really got into a groove on impermanence. And that's how freeing it can be.
Mm.
That for me it was all the striving to be like a better person. And if I just get to that point, then I can relax, then I'm there. Or, or even on vacation, if I just get to this point in time, then I'll relax and that's it. That's then I'm there. I'm in there. And we realize there's really no there. And that can be really freeing. Maybe I think it's a little bit hard for us as Westerners and Americans to sort of let go of that. Like, oh, I mean, I didn't get anything done that was important, but yeah, it's a kind of a paradox. So if you wake up and you realize you've been kind of asleep and grinding away, then celebrate it. Just let go of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave. Yeah. Yeah, that clinging to a destination or some fixed identity is the opposite of happiness. Yeah. Thank you. Other thoughts or yeah.
I had experience with working with the four elements, which it's not particularly spoken to me in the past, but outside, there was a greater sense of connection with the solid things around me. Think of the earth element. And then it happened with the swifts in the sky that I was just aware of the kind of limitlessness of the sky. And then these little swifts going over, and I recognized that we shared that too. It was just a sense of connection, no separation that I haven't experienced before.
And for those of you who don't know birds, he's talking about chimney swifts, which are very small birds in the sky. Yeah. Jane, check in here.
We talked about the difference between, in a sense, being in the present, where we are integrated with our whole body, versus in this analytical mindset where we feel like we are our brain, our head, and our body's there kind of as an appendage. A little bit, we got into talking about being in a flow, and actually in sport sometimes there's an experience of just being in a flow, and then we touched a little bit too about the childhood integration and presentness that we all can still have, but that we have to sometimes make a conscious effort to take that in. And sometimes we observe it in the younger people in our family. And so it just was a lot about integration of our whole self. And someone mentioned that and it's what we've learned here so often, that actually our bodies are always reflecting the now. And it is this focus on our analytical mind that we lose the present at times.
Thank you, Jane. Anybody else? On Zoom? Well, thank you all for your presence, for your listening, for your practice. And may all beings be well, be safe, know, trust, connection, happiness and freedom. Thank you.